I'm Charlene Smith, 26 years old, and I will never forget the moment I stepped off that plane at Charleston International Airport, my backpack heavy with 2 years of memories from Guatemala. My hands trembled as I clutched the small gifts I'd brought for my family: handwoven bracelets, coffee beans from the mountains, a carved wooden box for my grandfather. I couldn't wait to see his face light up when I told him about the water systems we'd built, the communities we'd helped. 2 years felt like forever, but I was finally home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I pulled out my phone at baggage claim, my heart racing with excitement as I dialed my parents' number. No answer. I tried Derek next, imagining him picking me up with that big brother grin he used to have when we were kids. Straight to voicemail. My mom's phone? Nothing. A knot formed in my stomach, but I pushed it away. They probably just had their phones on silent. It was a Thursday afternoon. They were probably at work. I grabbed an Uber, giving the driver my childhood home address in the historic district. The Charleston air hit me as we drove through the city, humid, salty, familiar. Spanish moss hung from the live oaks lining the streets, and the pastel-colored houses looked exactly as I remembered them. I leaned back in my seat, exhausted from the long flight but too excited to rest. I'd surprise them all, show up at the door with my sunburned face and stories that would make my grandfather laugh. The Uber pulled up to my parents' house, a pristine white colonial with black shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. But something was wrong. The house was dark. No cars in the driveway, no lights on despite the late afternoon shadows. I paid the driver and walked up to the porch, my backpack suddenly feeling heavier. I rang the doorbell once, twice, 3 times, nothing. "Charlene, is that you?" I turned to see Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, standing at the edge of her yard with garden shears in her hand. Her face looked strange, a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe? "Mrs. Henderson? Yes, it's me. I just got back from Guatemala. Do you know where my parents are?" She set down her shears and walked closer, her expression shifting into something uncomfortable. "Oh, honey, you don't know?" The knot in my stomach tightened. "Know what?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. "Your grandfather, Thomas, he passed away about 3 weeks ago." The world tilted. I grabbed the porch railing, my backpack slipping off my shoulder and hitting the ground with a thud. "What? No, that can't be right." "I'm so sorry, dear. The funeral was 2 weeks ago. Your whole family was there. I just assumed... I thought you knew." 2 weeks ago. The funeral happened 2 weeks ago and nobody told me? My grandfather, the man who'd taught me to sail, who'd encouraged my dreams of helping people, who'd been the only one in my family who truly saw me, was gone. And they'd buried him without me. Why didn't anyone call me? My voice cracked. I sent emails with my contact information. They knew how to reach me. Mrs. Henderson looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know, sweetheart. I'm sure they tried." But I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe it any more than I did. I grabbed my backpack, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. "Where's my grandfather's house? Is anyone there?" "Derek's been staying there, I think. I've seen his car." I didn't wait for her to finish. I pulled up the rideshare app with trembling fingers and ordered another Uber. The 7-minute wait felt like an eternity. I stood there on my childhood porch, tears streaming down my face as the truth sunk in. My grandfather was dead. The funeral had happened 2 weeks ago, and my family, my own blood, had let me miss it. The ride to the waterfront estate felt surreal. I watched the familiar streets blur past, remembering every Sunday dinner at that house, every summer sailing trip, every late-night conversation on the dock where my grandfather would talk about integrity and purpose and building something that mattered. He'd been so proud when I told him about Guatemala, about wanting to use my marine biology degree to help communities access clean water. "That's real wealth, Charlene," he'd say, his weathered hands gripping mine. And now, he was gone. The Uber pulled up to the estate, and my breath caught. The house looked the same, a beautiful two-story colonial with wraparound porches and views of Charleston Harbor. But Derek's BMW was parked in the circular driveway, and lights blazed from every window. Music drifted from inside, something upbeat and celebratory. My grief turned to confusion, then anger. Why were the lights on? Why was there music? This should be a house in mourning. I paid the driver and walked up the brick pathway, my footsteps heavy. My hand was shaking as I reached for the doorbell, but before I could press it, the door swung open. Derek stood there, champagne flute in hand, wearing expensive clothes I'd never seen before. His face was flushed from drinking, a smile on his lips that died the instant he saw me. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. "Charlene," he breathed, and the champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble entryway. "Derek!" My voice was cold, steady, despite the rage building in my chest. "Someone want to tell me why I just found out from the neighbor that Grandpa died 3 weeks ago?" A woman appeared behind him, blonde, beautiful, dressed like she was attending a gala. She looked me up and down, her expression calculating. This had to be Vanessa, the girlfriend I'd heard about in Derek's occasional emails. "You're supposed to be," Derek started, then caught himself. "I mean, we didn't think you were coming back." "Didn't think I was coming back?" I stepped forward, my backpack still on my shoulders, my face still stained with tears. "Or didn't want me to come back?" Derek glanced at Vanessa, then back at me. His charming mask was trying to reassemble itself, but I could see the panic underneath. "It's not like that. We tried to reach you. Your emails weren't going through and—" "Don't you dare lie to me." My voice rose. 2 years of isolation and grief, and now this betrayal pouring out. "I sent Mom and Dad my contact information every month. You had my phone number. You could have called, texted, posted on social media, anything. But you didn't. You let me miss his funeral." "Charlene, you need to calm down," Vanessa said, her voice smooth and condescending. "You're clearly upset, and who the hell are you?" I snapped. "I'm Derek's fiancé, and this really isn't the best time for—" "The best time?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're having a party. In my grandfather's house. The man just died, and you're celebrating?" Derek stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture that made me want to scream. "Look, there's a lot to explain. Why don't you come back tomorrow? Mom and Dad will be here, and we can all sit down and talk about this properly." "Talk about what, Derek? Why you're living in Grandpa's house like you own it? Why nobody bothered to tell me he was buying?" "He had a heart attack," Derek said, and for a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Sudden. He didn't suffer. That information hit me like a physical blow. A heart attack? Sudden? Had he been alone? Or had anyone been with him, had he called out for me? "I need to see his study," I said, moving toward the door. Derek blocked my path. "Not tonight, Charlene. You're emotional. You've been traveling. Let's talk tomorrow when you've had some rest." "Get out of my way." "This isn't your house anymore." The words were out before he could stop them, and Vanessa's hand on his arm tightened for warning. I stared at my brother, at this man who looked like the boy I'd grown up with, but was somehow a stranger. "What did you just say?" Derek's jaw clenched. "I said we'll explain everything tomorrow. Come to Mom and Dad's house at 10. We'll talk then." He started to close the door, and I saw it then. The fear in his eyes quickly masked but unmistakable. He was scared. Scared that I showed up. Scared that I was asking questions. "What did you do, Derek?" I whispered. "Nothing. I did nothing wrong. Now go get some rest, and we'll sort this all out in the morning." He closed the door in my face, and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood there on my grandfather's porch, the porch where he'd taught me to tie sailing knots, where we'd watched summer storms roll in off the harbor, where he'd hugged me goodbye 2 years ago and told me to go make him proud. My legs gave out and I sank onto the top step, burying my face in my hands. My grandfather was dead. My family had erased me from his final moments, from his funeral, from his memory. And now Derek was living in his house, drinking champagne and celebrating something? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and searched for a nearby hotel. I found a cheap place near the airport and booked it without thinking. Then I opened my email and scrolled back through 2 years of messages, every update I'd sent home, every photo, every request for news about the family. All of them sent, none of them bounced back. They'd received every single one. Telling and preparing the story took us a lot of time.
Charlene. Her voice was cool, controlled. Derek said you might stop by. Might? I stepped forward and she had no choice but to let me in. He told me to be here at 10. The house smelled like expensive candles and coffee. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The formal living room with furniture nobody actually sat on, the family photos arranged on the mantel with mathematical precision. I noticed immediately that most of the photos featuring me had been moved to less prominent positions. My father sat in his usual chair by the window, a newspaper in his lap that he wasn't reading. Richard Smith, 63, had always been a distant presence in my life, more interested in business than family, more comfortable with spreadsheets than conversations. He glanced up when I entered, but didn't stand. "Charlene," he said, his tone suggesting I was an expected but unwelcome business appointment. Derek was already there, standing by the fireplace like he was staging a presentation. He'd dressed for the occasion, khakis and a button-down, the picture of respectability. Vanessa sat on the couch, her legs crossed, watching me with cold calculation. "Sit down, honey," my mother said, gesturing to a chair position so I'd have to look up at Derek. I remained standing. "Someone want to explain why nobody told me my grandfather died?" My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "We tried to reach you, Charlene. You were unreachable. I sent you emails every month with my contact information, phone numbers, addresses, even the name of the village where I was working." "Those messages must not have gone through," Derek said smoothly. "Technology can be unreliable in remote areas." "The messages went through fine when you wanted to tell me about Derek's engagement." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to an email from my mother, dated 6 months ago. "This one made it just fine." My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't take that tone with me. You chose to leave, Charlene. You chose Guatemala over your family." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. "I chose to help people build clean water systems. Grandpa supported that decision. He encouraged it." "Your grandfather was old and sentimental," my father said, finally looking at me. "He didn't understand that family comes first." "Family comes first?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Then where were you when he was dying? Where were you at his funeral? Because I would have been there if anyone had bothered to tell me." Derek stepped forward, his expression shifting into something meant to look sympathetic. "Look, I know you're upset. We all are. Losing Dad was hard on everyone." Dad. He called him Dad, not Grandpa. Something about that felt wrong, possessive. "The funeral was beautiful," my mother added, very dignified. The whole Charleston social scene was there. Of course, the social scene mattered more than the family actually being complete. "We need to talk about the estate," Derek said, pulling a folder from the side table. "Since you weren't here, decisions had to be made." My stomach dropped. "What decisions?" He opened the folder, sliding papers across the coffee table toward me. Official legal documents, stamped and signed. Dad's will left everything to the family. The house, the shipping company, all the investments, about $3.2 million total. I stared at the papers, my hands shaking too badly to pick them up. He left it to the family. That includes me. It would have, Derek said, and there was something almost apologetic in his tone. Almost. But you abandoned your responsibilities here. You chose to leave for 2 years without any clear plan to return. The probate judge determined you were legally unreachable and that the estate needed active management. Legally unreachable? I was in Guatemala, not on Mars. You were off the grid, my mother said sharply. No permanent address, no stable phone number, living in some village without proper infrastructure. You made yourself unavailable. So the judge transferred everything to me, Derek continued, his voice steady now, confident, as the present and committed family member, someone who was actually here when Dad needed us. The words hit me like physical blows. Grandpa would never have wanted that. He would have wanted me to what? My mother interrupted. To come home and play with your marine biology degree? To squander a fortune on idealistic projects? Your grandfather left that money to be managed by someone responsible. Someone like Derek, who has failed at every business he's ever started? The words were out before I could stop them. Those were learning experiences, and at least I was here. At least I didn't abandon ship when things got real. Things got real? I was shouting now, months of isolation and grief exploding out of me. I was building water systems for communities that are dying from preventable diseases. That's not abandonment, that's service. It's selfishness, my mother snapped, putting strangers ahead of your own family, shaming us with your martyrdom complex. The room went silent. My father had still not moved from his chair, watching this play out like it was a business negotiation that didn't concern him. I looked at them. My mother standing rigid with her arms crossed, my father in his chair, pretending to read his newspaper, Derek by the fireplace playing the responsible son, Vanessa watching everything with predatory interest. This was my family. These were the people who had raised me, who were supposed to love me, and they'd erased me without a second thought. I'm going to fight this, I said, gathering the papers. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Derek said, and for the first time I heard genuine steel in his voice. The judge ruled. The will was probated. It's done, Charlene. Go back to Guatemala or stay in Charleston and build your little charity projects, but the estate is settled. We'll help you, of course, my mother added, her tone shifting to something meant to sound generous. We're not heartless. We can set up a small trust fund, maybe $50,000, to help you get established. But you need to accept reality. $50,000 out of $3 million. A tip, basically. Hush money. I don't want your charity. I walked toward the door, the papers clutched against my chest. I want justice.
Charlene, wait. My father stood for the first time, but he didn't approach me. Don't make this ugly. Don't drag the family name through some legal battle that you'll lose anyway. Your grandfather wouldn't want that. I turned back, and the rage I'd been holding finally broke free. Don't you dare tell me what my grandfather would want. You didn't know him. None of you did. He was a man of integrity, of principle, of love, things none of you understand, and he would be ashamed of what you've done. I walked out before they could respond, before my mother could call me dramatic again, before Derek could spin more lies. I made it to the sidewalk before my legs gave out, and I sat there on the curb, shaking with rage and grief and disbelief. They'd really done it. My own family had conspired to steal everything my grandfather had built, everything he'd wanted me to have. And they'd done it with smiles and legal documents and justifications about responsibility and family loyalty. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen through blurred vision. I needed help, legal help. But I didn't know any lawyers in Charleston, and I couldn't afford the kind of attorney who could fight this. Then I remembered something. Emails from my grandfather years ago mentioning someone, a lawyer he'd helped, someone he trusted. I opened my email and searched for her name, Margaret Chen. The hotel room felt like a cage. I'd been sitting on the edge of the bed for an hour, my grandfather's old emails open on my laptop, scrolling through years of correspondence searching for anything that could help me. That's when I found it. An email from 3 years ago, right before I left for Guatemala. Charlene, if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, call Margaret Chen. I've attached her contact information. She's family in all the ways that matter. She'll know what to do. Love, Grandpa. Attached was a phone number and an address for a law office in downtown Charleston. Margaret Chen, Esquire, Estate Planning and Probate Law. My hands shook as I dialed the number. It was Saturday morning. She probably wouldn't even be in the office. I'd get a voicemail, maybe an answering service telling me to call back Monday. But after 2 rings, a woman's voice answered. Margaret Chen. I froze, suddenly unsure what to say. Miss Chen? My name is Charlene Smith. I'm Thomas Smith's granddaughter. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, but with an edge of something like relief. Charlene, stay exactly where you are. Tell me where you are. I'm at the airport inn on... I know it. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart pounding, the way she'd said my name like she'd been waiting for my call, like she knew something. 18 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman in her late 50s, Asian, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than me. I opened the door, and Margaret Chen walked in with the authority of someone who owned every room she entered. She was shorter than me, but her presence filled the space. Her eyes, sharp, assessing, swept over me quickly before softening. You look like him, she said quietly. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. You knew my grandfather? I knew him very well. She set her briefcase on the small desk and turned to face me fully. Sit down, Charlene. We have a lot to discuss. I sat on the edge of the bed while she took the desk chair, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She's been waiting for you to come home, she said. Thomas told me you were in Guatemala. He was so proud of that work. Tears pricked my eyes at the mention of his pride. Did he know? About the water systems? He knew everything. He read every email you sent. Margaret pulled out a tablet from her briefcase. Did you know your family was intercepting your messages, marking them as read, so you'd think they were being received but never actually responding? The room tilted. What? Your brother set up a filter on the family email account. Anything from you went to a separate folder. Your parents saw the messages briefly, enough to know that you were alive, but Derek made sure they never engaged. He was building a narrative that you'd abandoned the family. How do you know this? Because I'm the executor of your grandfather's estate. The real executor, not Judge Morrison, not Derek, me. I couldn't breathe. But Derek showed me documents. A probate ruling? Fraudulent. All of it. Margaret's voice was steel now. Your grandfather came to me 6 months before he died. He knew his health was failing, and he knew exactly what your family would try to do. So we created protections. She opened the folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was thick, cream-colored paper with my grandfather's handwriting across the front. To be opened only in Charlene's presence. He wrote this for you, Margaret said softly, handing me the envelope. Read it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's distinctive script, and just seeing his handwriting again made my chest ache.
My dearest Charlene, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry I couldn't wait for you to come home. But I need you to know that everything I've built, the company, the house, all of it, is yours. Not because you're my granddaughter, though I love you more than words can express, but because you're the only one who understands what wealth really means. I've watched Derek destroy every opportunity I've given him. I've seen your mother chase status instead of substance, your father choose comfort over courage. They're not bad people, Charlene, but they're weak. And weakness, when combined with greed, becomes dangerous. I knew they'd try to steal what's yours. That's why I gave Margaret the real will and made her the true executor. Everything is protected until you return. Let her guide you. She's brilliant, ethical, and she owes me a debt she's been trying to repay for 30 years. Use this inheritance wisely, not for luxury, but for purpose. Build something that matters. Touch lives the way you've already been doing in Guatemala. Make me proud. But more than anything, know this. You were never the outsider in this family. You were just the only one who refused to pretend that money and status mattered more than character. That made you lonely, I know, but that also made you right. Fight for what's yours, not because you need the money, but because letting them steal it would validate everything they believe, that might makes right, that greed wins, that good people finish last. Prove them wrong, my darling girl. You have the strength. You always did. All my love, Grandpa. I read it twice, tears streaming down my face, my grandfather's voice so clear in every word that I could almost hear him speaking. He knew. He knew they would do this? He knew 6 months before he died. He had a minor heart episode, just a warning, but it made him face reality. He came to my office and spent 3 days making sure everything was airtight. "Tell me about you," I said, wiping my eyes. He said you owed him a debt. Margaret's expression softened with memory. I was 23, the daughter of Chinese immigrants who ran a laundromat in North Charleston. I had a bachelor's degree in political science and dreams of law school, but no money. I took a job at your grandfather's shipping company as a clerk, filing papers, answering the phones, making coffee. One day, I was filing documents in his office while he worked. He asked me what I was reading. I always had a book with me. I told him it was a collection of Supreme Court cases. He asked why. I said because I wanted to be a lawyer but couldn't afford law school. Margaret turned back to me, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. He wrote me a check right there. Full tuition for 3 years at the University of South Carolina Law School, plus living expenses. When I tried to refuse, he said, "You'll pay me back by being the kind of lawyer who cares about people more than profit." He paid for your entire education? Not just that. He mentored me through law school, gave me summer internships at the company, introduced me to every legal contact he had. When I graduated, he helped me start my practice. Everything I am, everything I've built, started with his faith in a girl nobody else saw potential in. So when he came to me 6 months ago and said his family was going to try to steal from you, the only person in his life who shared his values, I told him I'd protect you with everything I have. This is how I repay him, by making sure his real legacy goes to his true heir. I looked at the letter again, at the folder Margaret had brought, and at this woman my grandfather had trusted with everything. What do we do now?
Some people in our family might not show up the way you need them to. That's their loss, not yours. Never let anyone make you feel small. Never let anyone make you doubt your worth. Keep being curious. Keep being kind. Keep being exactly who you are. I'll be watching over you, my butterfly. Always. Love, Dad. Sophia clutched the letter to her chest. We stayed in that storage unit for another hour, going through the age 8 box, finding a photo album Marcus had made, a list of his favorite memories with her, a recipe for his famous pancakes written in his handwriting so she could make them when she was older. Every item was chosen with care. Every word was deliberate. He'd known exactly what we'd need. As we loaded things into the car, we took the age 8 box and the videos, leaving the rest for later. I kept thinking about the envelope for the Rodriguez family. Marcus had left them a message, a challenge, and I was done making excuses for them. If Marcus thought they needed to see this, then they would see it. Not because I was trying to fix anything, but because he'd asked me to. Because I owed it to Marcus to honor his wishes, even if it meant making his family uncomfortable. That night, after Sophia fell asleep wearing both her butterfly necklaces, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope for the Rodriguez family and the one marked for me. Jade had gone home, but promised to come back tomorrow to help with whatever came next. I opened my envelope first. Emma, if you're reading this, you're exhausted. I know you. I know how hard you push yourself, how much you carry without complaint. I know you've been trying to keep everyone happy, to maintain peace, to make sure Sophia doesn't feel the loss too deeply. Stop. You can't carry everything. You can't fix my family. You can't make them love you and Sophia the way they should. That's their choice, not your failure. I married you because you saw beauty in broken things. You believed in second chances. You thought love could bridge any gap. And I loved that about you, but Emma, some gaps are too wide. Some people don't want to be bridged. My mother will blame you for my death because it's easier than blaming herself for pushing me toward a life I never wanted. My father will stay silent because he's been silent our whole lives. Derek will feel guilty but won't act on it because he's too afraid of disappointing them. Don't wait for them to change. Don't make Sophia wait for them to change. You are enough. You have always been enough. You didn't trap me or marry up or any of the other garbage they've probably said. You saved me. You gave me permission to choose my own life, my own path. You gave me Sophia. You gave me happiness. The medical bills, the financial stress, I'm so sorry I left you with that. I tried to plan as best I could. There's money in the trust, money for Sophia's college, money to help you breathe a little easier. Gerald has all the documents. But more than money, I'm giving you permission to be angry, permission to cut ties with people who hurt you, permission to move on, to date again, to find love again. Sophia needs a happy mother more than she needs a martyred one. I'm gone, Emma, and I hate that. I hate that I won't grow old with you, won't see Sophia graduate, won't meet my grandchildren someday. But I'm not so selfish that I expect you to stop living. Find joy. Find love. Find yourself again beneath all the grief and stress and responsibility. And when you're ready, when Sophia asks about my family, when they push back, when you're tempted to make excuses for them again, remember this. You deserve better. Sophia deserves better. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. I love you. I will always love you. But you have to live. Forever yours. Marcus. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He'd known exactly what I'd need to hear, exactly when I'd need to hear it. He'd given me permission to stop trying so hard, to stop making myself smaller to accommodate people who would never appreciate it. The envelope for his family sat next to me, sealed and waiting. I thought about just throwing it away, pretending it didn't exist. It would be easier, safer, less confrontational. But Marcus had written it for a reason. He'd spent his dying days preparing not just gifts for Sophia, but truth for his family. Truth he was too afraid to speak when he was alive, too conflict-averse to force them to hear. He was giving me the weapon he never had the courage to use himself. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. The same chat where they'd all rejected Sophia's party invitation, where Tyler had mocked us, where Patricia's secretary had sent that cold, formal message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One text. That's all it would take. One text to detonate everything. But something stopped me. Not fear, not people-pleasing. Strategy. If I sent this now, late at night, they'd have time to prepare their defenses, to discuss their response, to present a united front. Patricia would control the narrative, Derek would fall in line, Raymond would stay silent. No. If I was going to do this, if I was going to honor Marcus's wishes and finally demand they see us, I needed to do it on my terms, in a way that would force them to act, not react. I thought about Sophia's 9th birthday, a year away, about all the birthdays after that, about Marcus's careful planning, his attention to timing, his understanding that some messages need the perfect moment to land. The party was that moment. The rejection was that moment. And Marcus had known it would be. I put my phone down and picked up the envelope for his family. I'd watch the video first, understand what Marcus wanted them to know, and then I'd decide how to deliver it. Not tonight. Not in anger or grief or exhaustion. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'd watch it and I'd make a plan. Because that's what Marcus had taught me. That some battles require preparation. That love sometimes means fighting. That the strongest stance isn't always the loudest one. I went upstairs and checked on Sophia. She was sleeping peacefully, both butterfly necklaces glinting in the dim light from her nightlight. On her nightstand sat the letter from Marcus, the photo album, and her iPad paused on one of his videos. She'd fallen asleep to the sound of her father's voice. And I realized that's all we'd really needed all along. Not his family's approval, not their presence at parties, not their conditional, reluctant love. Just him. Just the pieces of him that he'd left behind. Just the proof that we'd been loved completely, even if we'd lost him too soon. I climbed into bed and held Marcus's letter to my chest, reading it one more time in the darkness.
There was a beat of silence, then Sophia's voice came back, sharp with fury. What? I explained everything. The fraudulent probate filing, Derek's gambling debts, my family's conspiracy to cut me out. Sophia listened without interrupting, though I could hear her sharp intakes of breath at the worst parts. When I finished, she said simply, "I'm coming there." "Sophia, you don't have to." "The hell I don't. You spent 2 years helping my communities, my people. You think I'm going to let your garbage family steal from you? I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be there tomorrow." Tears pricked my eyes again. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until I tell your brother exactly what I think of him." She paused. "And your family is insane. You know that, right? The way they talk about your humanitarian work like it's some character flaw instead of the most beautiful thing a person can do." "I know." "Good, because you're worth 10 of them, and we're going to prove it." After we hung up, Margaret was smiling. "I like her already. She's fierce. You're going to need fierce." Margaret checked her watch. "Nathan is expecting us at 3. That gives us time to go through these documents more thoroughly." We spent the next few hours building a timeline. Every communication I'd sent from Guatemala, every business decision my grandfather had made in his final years, every mention of his wishes for the estate. The picture that emerged was clear. Thomas Smith had explicitly wanted me to inherit, and he'd taken specific steps to ensure it happened. He changed his will 8 months before he died, Margaret explained, showing me the document. "This is the real will, properly witnessed and notarized. It leaves the shipping company, the waterfront estate, and all investments to you, with specific instructions that you're to use the inheritance to continue your humanitarian work." Does Derek know this will exists? He knows there was a will, but he thinks the one Judge Morrison probated is the real one. Your grandfather kept 2 versions, a public one that looked standard, and this one, the true document, that he kept with me. How is that legal? It's not uncommon for people to update their wills, and your grandfather was very careful to follow all legal procedures. The will Derek presented isn't fake, exactly, it's just outdated, from 5 years ago before your grandfather really understood his family's nature. Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. "Nathan is ready for us." We drove to the waterfront business district, to an old brick building that housed Smith Maritime's offices. My heart clenched seeing the name. my grandfather's name on the building. This was his legacy, the company he'd built from nothing, and Derek had his hands on it now. Nathan Reynolds was waiting in the conference room. He stood when we entered, and I barely recognized him. He'd aged since I last saw him, but his eyes were still sharp. When he saw me, his whole expression crumbled. "Charlene," he breathed, and then he crossed the room and pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, my girl, Thomas would be so glad you're home." I hugged him back, breathing in the familiar smell of pipe tobacco and sea air that I associated with my grandfather's world. "I miss him," I whispered. "So do I. Every damn day." Nathan squeezed my hand. "But we honor him by fighting for what he wanted, by protecting his true legacy." As we left Smith Maritime's offices, Margaret's phone rang. She answered, listened, then hung up with a satisfied expression. "That was my private investigator. He's been watching Derek, took some very interesting photos of him meeting with known loan sharks." She showed me her phone. Images of Derek looking nervous outside a warehouse, talking to men who looked exactly the kind of people you didn't want to owe money to. This proves the debts. It proves he's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Landing at CHS tomorrow 2 p.m., ready to kick some ass." I showed Margaret, who laughed. I really like her. That night, lying in Margaret's guest room, I thought about the team that was forming around me. Margaret, who owed my grandfather everything and was repaying it with fierce loyalty. Nathan, who'd worked beside him for half a century and refused to watch his legacy be destroyed. Sophia, flying across the country because that's what true friends do. And my grandfather himself, still protecting me from beyond the grave through his careful planning and the relationships he'd built on trust and kindness. My blood family had betrayed me, but my chosen family, the people my grandfather knew would stand beside me, was gathering. We were building something Derek couldn't fight with charm or manipulation or corrupt judges. We were building truth. And truth, my grandfather had always said, was the most powerful weapon of all. Tomorrow, Sophia would arrive, and then the real battle would begin. Sophia burst out of Charleston International arrivals like a hurricane in human form. She spotted me immediately, dropped her carry-on, and ran straight into a hug that nearly knocked us both over. "Show me which one is your brother," she said into my shoulder. "I just want to talk to him. With my fists." Despite everything, I laughed. "You can't punch him. Margaret says that's assault." "Margaret sounds like a fun killer. Where is she?" Margaret stepped forward with an amused expression. "I'm also a lawyer who believes in evidence-based revenge." Sophia's grin widened. "Okay, I like you." We drove back to Margaret's house, Sophia peppering me with questions the entire way. How was I holding up? Had I eaten? Was I sleeping? When I admitted I'd barely done either, she took charge immediately. "First we feed you, then we destroy your family. In that order." Margaret actually smiled. "I'm revising my opinion. You're going to be very helpful." Over lunch, takeout from a local cafe that Sophia insisted on buying, we laid out everything we'd discovered. Sophia's expression grew darker with each revelation. "So let me get this straight. Your brother forged documents, bribed a judge, stole millions of dollars, and your parents just went along with it because they care more about appearances than their own daughter?" "That about sums it up," I said quietly. "And this Vanessa person is basically a professional con artist who's done this before?" Margaret nodded, which is why we need to be careful. She's experienced at covering her tracks. Sophia pulled out her laptop. "Good thing I'm experienced at uncovering them. Charlene, I need access to any family accounts you still have passwords to. Email, social media, anything shared." "Is that legal?" I asked, glancing at Margaret. "If they're accounts you legitimately have access to, yes. You're not hacking. You're accessing information you're authorized to see." I gave Sophia the login to the old family email account and a shared cloud storage we'd used for photos. Within minutes, her fingers were flying across the keyboard, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. "Oh, this is interesting," she muttered. "Your brother isn't very good at digital security. What did you find?" "He's been using the shared family email to communicate with Vanessa. Look at this." She turned the laptop so we could see. Email chains discussing the inheritance situation and making sure C doesn't come back before everything's finalized. My stomach churned seeing my name reduced to an initial, like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be managed.
Sophia kept scrolling, and here messages to someone named Judge CM discussing expediting the probate process. That's gotta be Judge Morrison, right? Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Can you print those?
Already downloading everything to a secure drive. Sophia's expression was grim. There's more. Vanessa has quite the digital footprint. She's not as careful as she thinks. For the next hour, Sophia walked us through what she'd found. Vanessa's Instagram showed a pattern, photos with different wealthy men over the past 5 years, always at expensive locations, always wearing designer clothes. But the men changed every year or so. She deletes the old photos when she moves on, but the internet never forgets. I found cached versions. She pulled up archived pages. Here she is in Atlanta, 2 years ago, with a man named Robert Chen, no relation to you, Margaret. He died 6 months after they started dating, and there was a dispute over his estate. The case Nathan found, Margaret said, taking notes. Right. Before that, she was in Miami with someone else. Same pattern. Older man, sudden relationship, then either death or a messy breakup followed by inheritance drama. I stared at the screen, at Vanessa's calculated smile in photo after photo. She targeted Derek specifically. She hunts the desperate and the weak, Sophia said bluntly. Your brother was perfect. Insecure, in debt, about to lose access to a fortune when you came home. She probably saw him coming from a mile away. Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and stood abruptly. My investigator just sent something. He's been following Derek today. She pulled up her email and opened an attachment. A series of photos taken that afternoon. Derek outside a waterfront warehouse, looking nervous, meeting with 2 men whose body language screamed danger, money changing hands. He's paying down his debts, Margaret said quietly, with estate funds. Can we prove that? I asked. Nathan's working on the financial records, but yes, there are withdrawals from the company accounts that align with these meetings. She looked at me, her expression serious. Charlene, this is embezzlement. Combined with the inheritance fraud, Derek is looking at serious prison time. The reality of that hit me hard. My brother, for all his faults, still my brother, was going to prison because of his greed, his weakness, his terrible choices. Are you okay? Sophia asked gently, her hand on my shoulder. I don't know. Part of me wants him to pay for what he did, but part of me just... I trailed off, unable to articulate the complicated grief of watching someone you once loved destroy themselves. You can feel both things, Margaret said quietly. Justice and sadness aren't mutually exclusive. Sophia closed her laptop. So what's the next move? Margaret smiled, and there was something predatory in it. Now we set a trap. We need Derek to incriminate himself further, on record. And I think I know exactly how to do it. She outlined her plan. I would reach out to Derek, suggest a private meeting to discuss a compromise. We'd make him think I was desperate, willing to accept a small payout to avoid a legal battle. He'll feel safe, confident, and confident people talk too much. You want me to wear a wire, I said. South Carolina is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as you're part of the conversation, it's legal. Margaret pulled out a small recording device, no bigger than a USB drive. Sophia can help you set this up. When? I asked. Tomorrow. The sooner we get his confession on record, the sooner we can file our legal challenge. That night, I lay awake in Margaret's guest room rehearsing what I'd say to Derek, how I'd play vulnerable, desperate, beaten down. It went against every instinct. I wanted to scream at him, not pretend to surrender. But Margaret was right. This was about strategy, not satisfaction. The next morning, I sent Derek a text. Can we meet? Just the 2 of us. I want to talk about finding a solution that doesn't destroy the family. His response came within minutes. Dock Street Restaurant, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone. I bought it, I said, showing Margaret the message. Of course he did. He thinks you're weak. Margaret's smile was sharp. Let's show him how wrong he is. Sophia spent the afternoon teaching me how to use the recording device, tucked into a small pendant I wore around my neck. Just act natural, she coached. Ask open-ended questions. Let him talk. At 6:45, I stood outside Dock Street, my heart pounding. The restaurant was one of my grandfather's favorites, a cruel choice by Derek, whether intentional or not. I walked in, and Derek was already there, sitting at a corner table with a glass of wine. He stood when he saw me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the brother I remembered, but it vanished quickly, replaced by calculated concern. "Charlene, I'm glad you reached out." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, please." I sat, my hand unconsciously touching the pendant. The recording device was active. "I've been thinking about what you said," I started, keeping my voice soft, defeated, "about how I abandoned the family. Maybe you're right." Derek's posture relaxed slightly. "I'm not trying to attack you. I know you were doing good work in Guatemala, but family has to come first. I understand that now. I paused, as if gathering courage. "I just want to know what really happened with Grandpa, with the will." Derek took a long sip of wine. "It's complicated. Dad knew his health was failing. He wanted to make sure the estate was protected, managed by someone who'd be present. But he loved me," I said quietly. "He supported my work." "He loved you, sure, but love and competence are different things." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. "You're idealistic, Charlene. That's admirable. But running a multi-million-dollar estate, that takes someone practical. Someone like you. Someone who understands business, who has connections in Charleston." He gestured vaguely. "Judge Morrison saw that. She understood that the estate needed active management." "Judge Morrison," I repeated, keeping my tone neutral. "Mom said she's a family friend?" Derek's smile widened, emboldened by wine and what he thought was my submission. "Caroline's been helpful, very helpful. She understands how things work in Charleston. Who matters, what matters." "It must have been complicated getting the probate process so quickly." "Not really. Caroline expedited things. She saw that you were unreachable, that decisions needed to be made." He paused, then added with shocking casuality, "Between you and me, having a judge who's flexible about these things is incredibly valuable." My heart raced. He was admitting it, actually admitting to corrupting the probate process. "And the will itself," I pressed, "did Grandpa really leave everything to the family, like you said?" Derek's shifted slightly, a tell I recognized from childhood. He was about to lie. "The will was clear, assets to be managed by the present family member." "But what about his letter to me, the one where he said he wanted me to use the inheritance for humanitarian work?" Derek's eyes narrowed. "What letter?" I'd made it up, a gambit to see his reaction. His confusion told me everything. He didn't know about my grandfather's real will, the one with Margaret. "Never mind," I said quickly. "I must be misremembering." Derek relaxed again. "Look, I know this is hard, but I'm willing to help you. We can set up a trust fund, maybe 100,000. That's more than generous given the circumstances. 100,000 out of 3 million. Given that you abandoned your responsibilities, yes, that's fair." He signaled the waiter for another glass of wine. "And honestly, Charlene, you should take it. Fighting this in court would be expensive, embarrassing. Your humanitarian work would be dragged through the mud." "Why would that happen?" Derek's smile turned cold. "Because I'd make it did. I'd show that you chose strangers over family, that you're unstable, impractical, that you've always been the problem in this family." There it was, the threat underneath the fake concern. "What about your gambling debts?" I asked quietly. His face went white. "What?" "The money you owe. That's why you needed the inheritance so badly, right? Not because you're the responsible one, but because you're desperate." "Who told you that?" "Nathan? That old fool doesn't know what he's talking about."
"So you don't owe anyone money?" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "This conversation is over. You want to play hardball? Fine, but you'll lose. You're just a naive girl who thinks she can save the world. I'm a businessman with connections, resources. Judge Morrison will back me up, and by the time we're done, you won't get a dime." "And what about Vanessa?" I asked, still seated, projecting calm I didn't feel. Does she get a cut of the inheritance? Derek's expression turned venomous. You don't know what you're talking about. I know she's done this before. Atlanta, Miami. I know she targets desperate men and helps them steal from their families. For a moment, I thought Derek might actually hit me. His fists clenched, his face flushed with rage and wine. But instead, he leaned down, his voice a harsh whisper. You're going to regret this. I'll make sure you get nothing. Nothing. You think Grandpa loved you? He tolerated you because he felt sorry for you, the weird granddaughter who never fit in. This inheritance should have been mine from the start. I finally got what I deserved, what I'm owed after years of being second to you in his eyes. The raw resentment in his voice was shocking. This wasn't just about money. It was about decades of feeling inferior, of watching our grandfather bond with me over shared values. Derek couldn't understand. He loved you too, I said, quietly. He wanted you to succeed, but you kept making terrible choices. Terrible choices? Like trying to build businesses while you played hero in third world countries? Like staying in Charleston while you abandoned us? I made the choice to be here, to be family, and this is my reward. He threw some bills on the table and stormed out, leaving me sitting there with my heart pounding and the recording device still active, having captured every damning word. I waited 5 minutes before leaving, giving Derek time to get far away. Outside, I texted Margaret. Got it all. Every word. Her response was immediate. Come home. We need to hear this. Back at Margaret's house, we gathered in her office. Me, Sophia, Margaret, and Nathan, who'd come over when Margaret called. I connected the recording device to Margaret's computer, and we listened in silence. Derek's voice filled the room, admitting to Judge Morrison's flexibility, threatening to destroy my reputation, revealing his resentment and desperation. When it ended, the silence was heavy. That's it, Margaret said finally. That's everything we need. Admission of judicial corruption, evidence of fraudulent intent, and proof of his real motivations. What happens now? I asked. Margaret's expression was both satisfied and sad. Now we file. Tomorrow morning, we submit a comprehensive legal challenge to the probate court requesting a different judge. We include the recording, Nathan's financial documents, Sophia's digital evidence, and the real will. We expose everything. And Derek goes to prison. Derek goes to prison. So does Judge Morrison. Vanessa will probably cut a deal to testify against them both. I thought about my brother's face tonight. The rage and resentment and fear. Part of me felt triumph. Justice would be served. But another part just felt an overwhelming sadness for what could have been. He called Grandpa Dad. Did you notice that? Like he was trying to claim ownership even of their relationship? Nathan's voice was gruff with emotion. Thomas tried with Derek, gave him chances, opportunities. But some people... He trailed off, shaking his head. Some people would rather blame everyone else than look at their own choices. Sophia squeezed my hand. You did good tonight. I know that wasn't easy. It hadn't been. Playing vulnerable, letting Derek threaten me, staying calm when I wanted to scream. But Margaret was right. This was about strategy, about building an unshakable case. There's one more thing, Margaret said, pulling out another document. Your grandfather's letter mentioned Judge Morrison by name. He knew she was corrupt, had heard rumors. He specifically structured the real will to bypass her entirely. He knew she'd help Derek. He suspected. Thomas was very good at reading people. He knew exactly who Derek was, who your parents were, who you were, and he made his choices accordingly. That night I dreamed of my grandfather. Not the frail man in the hospital bed, but the strong figure from my childhood, teaching me to sail in Charleston Harbor. In the dream, he smiled and said, "You're doing just fine, my girl. Just fine." When I woke, I knew what was coming. Tomorrow we'd file the legal challenge. Tomorrow, the public battle would begin. My family would fight back with everything they had. Lies, character attacks, social pressure. But I had something they didn't. The truth. And people who loved me enough to fight for it. I got up,
dressed, and found Margaret already in her office, preparing the final documents. "Ready?" she asked. I thought about my grandfather's letter, about his faith in me, about the choice he made to protect his true heir even from beyond the grave. "I'm ready."
Loy, who believes in evidence-based revenge. Sophia's grin widened. Okay, I like you. We drove back to Margaret's house, Sophia peppering me with questions the entire way. How was I holding up? Had I eaten? Was I sleeping? When I admitted I'd barely done either, she took charge immediately. First, we feed you, then we destroy your family. In that order. Margaret actually smiled. I'm revising my opinion. You're going to be very helpful. Over lunch, takeout from a local cafe that Sophia insisted on buying, we laid out everything we'd discovered. Sophia's expression grew darker with each revelation. So, let me get this straight, she said, her fork stabbing at her salad with unnecessary force. Your brother forged documents, bribed a judge, stole millions of dollars, and your parents just went along with it because they care more about appearances than their own daughter? That about sums it up, I said quietly. And this Vanessa person is basically a professional con artist who's done this before? Margaret nodded. Which is why we need to be careful. She is experienced at covering her tracks. Sophia pulled out her laptop. Good thing I'm experienced at uncovering them. Charlene, I need access to any family accounts you still have passwords for. Email, social media, anything shared. Is that legal? I asked, glancing at Margaret. If they're accounts you legitimately have access to, yes, Margaret said. You're not hacking. You're accessing information you're authorized to see. I gave Sophia the login for the old family email account and a shared cloud storage we'd used for photos. Within minutes, her fingers were flying across the keyboard, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. Oh, this is interesting, she muttered. Your brother's not very good at digital security. What did you find? He's been using the shared family email to communicate with Vanessa. Look at this. She turned the laptop so we could see. Email chains discussing the inheritance situation and making sure C doesn't come back before everything's finalized. My stomach churned, seeing my name reduced to an initial, like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person. Sophia kept scrolling. And here, messages to someone named Judge C.M. discussing expediting the probate process. That's gotta be Judge Morrison, right? Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Can you print those? Already downloading everything to a secure drive. Sophia's expression was grim. There's more. Vanessa has quite the digital footprint. She's not as careful as she thinks. For the next hour, Sophia walked us through what she'd found. Vanessa's Instagram showed a pattern. Photos with different wealthy men over the past 5 years, always at expensive locations, always wearing designer clothes. But the men changed every year or so. She deletes the old photos when she moves on, but the internet never forgets. I found cached versions. She pulled up archived pages. Here she is in Atlanta 2 years ago with a man named Robert Chen. No relation to you, Margaret. He died 6 months after they started dating, and there was a dispute over his estate. The case Nathan found, Margaret said, taking notes. Right. Before that, she was in Miami with someone else. Same pattern. Older man, sudden relationship, then either death or a messy breakup, followed by inheritance drama. I stared at Vanessa's calculated smile in photo after photo. She targeted Derek specifically. She hunts the desperate and the weak, Sophia said bluntly. Your brother was perfect. Insecure, in debt, about to lose access to a fortune when you came home. She probably saw him coming from a mile away. Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and stood abruptly. My investigator just sent something. He's been following Derek today. She pulled up her email and opened an attachment. A series of photos taken that afternoon. Derek outside a waterfront warehouse, looking nervous, meeting with 2 men whose body language screamed danger. Money changing hands. He's paying down his debts, Margaret said quietly, with estate funds. Can we prove that? I asked. Nathan's working on the financial records, but yes, there are withdrawals from the company accounts that align with these meetings. She looked at me, her expression serious. Charlene, this is embezzlement. Combined with the inheritance fraud, Derek is looking at serious prison time. The reality of that hit me hard. My brother, for all his faults, still my brother, was going to prison because of his greed, his weakness, his terrible choices.